Park Jinu stood before the Galactic Council for the 200th time in his 40 years as Earth's ambassador. The great chamber stretched around him like the inside of a shell, filled with floating platforms where representatives of 100 species watched him with eyes that held no respect. Some had many eyes. Some had none. But all of them looked at the human the same way, like he was a pet that had wandered into its master's meeting. "Honored members of the council," Jinu said, his voice steady, despite the weight of decades pressing on his chest. "I come before you today to present humanity's formal request for a permanent seat among the ruling species of the Confederation." Laughter. It came from the Valuri platform, first a wet clicking sound that their throat sacs made when amused. Then the Montari joined with their high whistles. Soon the whole chamber rang with the sounds of alien mockery. The council speaker, a massive creature called Elder Vorix, raised one of his forearms for silence. His species, the Turani, had ruled the Confederation for 10,000 years. They stood 12 feet tall and moved like mountains, learning to walk. "Ambassador Park," Vorix said, and even his attempt at politeness sounded like pity. "Humanity has been part of our Confederation for 300 of your years. In that time, your species has proven useful for colonizing harsh worlds and performing labor that other species find distasteful. This is your role. This is your value. Why do you continue to ask for what you cannot have?" Jinu felt the words like knives, but his face showed nothing. He had learned long ago to hide his anger. "All humans had?" "We asked," Jinu replied, "because we have earned it. Human colonies produce 40% of the Confederation's food supply. Human engineers maintain the jump gates that connect your empires. Human soldiers have died in 7 wars defending Confederation interests. And you were compensated for all of this," said Representative Keth of the Valuri, his scaled face twisting into what might have been a smile. "Your kind receives payment. What more could you want? Recognition, equality, a voice in decisions that affect our worlds." The laughter returned, louder this time. Jinu thought about what waited for him back on Earth. Admiral Yoon Hannah, with her cold eyes and colder patience. Director Quan Tayson, who knew secrets that would make this council weep. They had sent him here one last time, not because they believed he would succeed, but because they needed to show humanity that every path had been tried. The council voted. 112 against. 0 in favor. Request denied, Elder Vorix announced. "Perhaps in another century, humanity will have matured enough to understand its place." Shtunu bowed a human gesture. The aliens had never bothered to learn the meaning of Vond, left the chamber. 3 days later, the Valuri Empire sent warships to blockade the human colony world of New Busan. The reason was a trade dispute over mining rights. Minor disagreement about contracts and percentages. The Valuri response was to surround the planet and prevent any ships from entering or leaving. 2 million humans lived on New Busan. The colony depended on supply ships for food and medicine. Without them, people would begin to starve within weeks. Jinu received the news in his quarters on the diplomatic station. He read the report 3 times, certain there must be some mistake. Then he walked to the council chamber and demanded an emergency session. "The Valuri have blockaded a human world," he said, standing in the center of the vast room while alien eyes watched without concern. 2 million people will die if this continues. I demand Confederation intervention." Representative Keth answered without hesitation. "The matter concerns a dispute between the Valuri Empire and a minor species. It is an internal matter. The Council has no authority to intervene." Internal matter. Jinu's voice cracked for the first time in 40 years. "Your ships surround our world. Your weapons point at our people. How is this internal?" "Because humans are part of the Confederation," Elder Vorix explained, as if speaking to a child. "And the Valuri are enforcing legal trade agreements. If the humans on that world had honored their contracts, this situation would not exist. The contracts were unfair from the beginning. Your courts wrote them to favor the Valuri. We had no choice but to sign. Then you should not have signed them." Jinu looked around the chamber. 100 species watched him, and not one showed sympathy. Not one suggested that blockading a planet and starving millions might be wrong. In their eyes, humans were not people. Humans were tools that had forgotten their purpose. "I am asking you," Genu said slowly, "for the last time. Will the Council act to save human lives?" Forix waved a massive hand in dismissal. "The Council has ruled. This session is concluded." Genu stood alone in the center of the chamber as the platforms began to float away. He thought about his wife, who had died believing he could change things through words. He thought about his children, who had stopped believing anything would change at all. He thought about 300 years of patience, of bowing, of swallowing pride, and speaking softly, and hoping that someday the galaxy would see humanity as equals. The last platform disappeared. Genu removed his diplomatic insignia, small gold pin he had worn for 4 decades, and let it fall to the floor. The sound it made was very small in the empty chamber. When he returned to Earth, Admiral Yoon Hana was waiting on the landing platform. She stood with her hands clasped behind her back, her uniform sharp against the night sky. Behind her, the lights of United Earth Command stretched to the horizon. "I watched the session," she said. Her voice carried no emotion, but her eyes held something Genu had never seen before. Something that looked almost like relief.
Oh.
"Then you know?" Genu replied. "I know." Director Quantason emerged from the shadows, his face unreadable. "Every legal path has been tried, every diplomatic option exhausted. The historical record is complete." Genu looked at these 2 people who had worked beside him for decades, preparing for a day they hoped would never come. He took a deep breath of Earth's aerial air, not the recycled atmosphere of alien stations, spoke 3 words. "They chose this." Admiral Yu nodded once. Then she turned and walked toward command, where 30,000 officers waited for orders that had been 3 centuries in the making. The galaxy had taught humanity that patience was weakness, that kindness was submission, that restraint was inability. Now humanity would teach the galaxy what those things actually meant. The lesson would be unforgettable, deep, beneath the mountains of what used to be called Korea. A door opened that had not moved in 200 years. Admiral Yoon Hana walked through it with Park Genu at her side, both of them silent as the ancient elevator carried them down into the earth. The facility was called Vanguard. It did not exist on any map. No satellite had ever photographed it. No alien inspector had ever been told it was there. For 3 centuries, humanity's greatest secret had waited in the darkness. Growing stronger while the galaxy laughed at the weak little humans, the elevator stopped. The doors opened. Genu gasped. Before them stretched a cavern so vast that clouds formed near its ceiling. And filling that cavern, row after endless row, stood warships. Not the small, outdated vessels that humanity showed to the Confederation. These were monsters of metal and fire, bristling with weapons that alien science could not explain. 40,000 ships, Admiral Yoon said, her voice echoing in the impossible space. Each one equal to 10 Confederation battlecruisers. Each one built in secret over 300 years. Genu walked forward as if in a dream. He had known about the deception, of course. All senior Earth officials knew. But knowing and seeing were different things. "How?" he whispered. A woman's voice answered from behind them, because they never thought to look. Chief Engineer Beak Sora approached with a tablet in her hands, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had spent her entire life in this cavern, building weapons that humanity prayed it would never need. "The Confederation gave us technology as charity," Sora explained, leading them through the forest of warships. Outdated engines, weak shields, weapons their children used as toys. They expected us to be grateful. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We took everything they gave us and made it better. Their shield technology operates at 12% efficiency. Ours operates at 94%. Their weapons fire once every 30 seconds. Ours fire continuously, and they never noticed." Genu asked. "They never looked. Why would they? We were just humans. Primitive creatures good for digging in dirt and dying in wars. The great species do not study the tools in their shed." They entered a command center, where hundreds of officers worked at glowing screens. Director Quan Tayson stood at the central platform. Watching data flow across displays that showed star systems the Confederation did not know humanity had claimed. "Our official records list 18 colony worlds," Quan said as they approached. "The actual number is 847. We have been expanding in secret since the first generation of the Confederation Agreement. Every world hidden. Every population unregistered." Admiral Yoon gestured to a massive holographic map that filled the air above them. Blue dots appeared, the human worlds the galaxy knew about, scattered and few. Then red dots began to appear, spreading across the maw. Like drops of blood, filling regions of space the Confederation believed were empty. "We surround them," Yoon said. "In 300 years, we positioned ourselves around every major Confederation power. Our hidden fleets can reach any alien homeworld within hours." He had spent 4 decades begging for scraps of respect, believing that diplomacy was humanity's only option. All that time, this had been waiting. All that time, humanity had held the power to demand what he had asked for politely. Why? He asked, "Why did we wait so long? Why did we suffer?" It was Quan who answered, "Because we are not like them. We do not strike first. We do not start wars for pride or profit. We gave them every chance to choose differently. 300 years of chances." His voice hardened. "They used every one of those chances to hurt us." A young officer approached Admiral Yoon with a report. She read it, and something flickered across her face, an emotion that looked almost like sadness. "To Busan," she said quietly. "The first supply ships have been turned back. The Valuri have fired warning shots at civilian transports. Estimated time until critical food shortage, 18 days. Jinu closed his eyes. 2 million people, including children, waiting to starve because an alien empire wanted to prove that humans did not matter.
What about the rest of the galaxy?
He asked. Will they intervene? 3 other species have requested council action, Quan replied. The Fenar, the Illumi, and the Teska. They were overruled. They always are. The powerful do what they want, and the rest watch in silence. Admiral Yoon moved to a communication console and pressed her hand against a scanner. Throughout the cavern, lights began to change from blue to red. Alarms sounded in distant corridors. Engines that had slept for decades began to wake. All fleet commanders, she said, her voice carrying to every hidden human base across 800 worlds. This is Admiral Yoon Hana of United Earth Command. Authorization code, Omega-7. Execute Revelation Protocol, across the galaxy. In shipyards buried in asteroids and bases hidden beneath frozen moons. In facilities floating in the darkness between stars, humanity began to move. 40,000 warships powered their engines. 12 million soldiers checked their weapons. 3 centuries of preparation focused into a single moment. Yoon turned to face Jinu. And now he could see what she had hidden for so long. Not eagerness. Not anger. Exhaustion. She had carried this burden for decades, hoping she would never have to use it. Ambassador, she said, your work is not finished. When this is over, someone will need to build the peace. That was always going to be you. And what will you build? She looked at the warships surrounding them, weapons of terrible power created by a species that had only wanted to be treated fairly. I will build the lesson, she said, the one they refused to learn with words. She turned to face her officers, her voice rising to fill the vast chamber. For 300 years we showed the galaxy our patience. We showed them our restraint. We showed them everything they wanted to see. She paused. Now we show them what we are. The first ships began to rise, engines glowing like captured stars. Above them, hidden doors and mountains and oceans and the dark sides of moons began to open. The galaxy was about to learn that the quiet creatures it had mocked for centuries had never been quiet at all. They had simply been waiting for the galaxy to choose its fate, and the galaxy had chosen poorly. The first warning came at dawn on the Valori homeworld. Sensors that had never detected a threat suddenly screamed with alerts. Defense commanders rushed to their stations, certain the equipment was broken. It had to be broken. What they saw on their screens was impossible. 500 human warships hung in the sky above their planet. They had appeared from nowhere, emerging from a dimension the Valuri did not know humans could access. Each ship was massive, covered in weapons that glowed with barely contained energy. Captain Han Miso stood on the bridge of the ESS Retribution, watching the Valuri scramble to respond. Around her, officers worked in focused silence. There was no excitement in the air, no celebration. Only the grim determination of people doing a job they wished they did not have to do. Communications, Miso said quietly. Open all frequencies. Officer Kong Yunji pressed a button, and her voice carried to every receiver on the planet below, to every ship in the Valori fleet, to every Confederation species listening in confused terror. This is the United Earth Fleet. For 300 years, humanity asked for nothing but fairness. You gave us contempt. You starved our children. You laughed at our pain. She paused, letting the words sink in. We are no longer asking. The Valuri defense commander, a scarred veteran named Fleet Lord Dex, responded immediately. His voice carried the arrogance that had defined his species for millennia.
You have human vessel.
You have made a grave error. Our fleet will destroy you within the hour. Surrender now, and we may show mercy. Captain Han watched the Valori warships arrange themselves in attack formation. 200 vessels, the pride of an empire that had conquered dozens of worlds. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never known fear. Fleet Lord Dex, Han replied, I am going to give you one chance. One chance more than you gave the children on New Busan? Withdraw your blockade. Release our people. Do this, and we will leave. The clicking laughter of the Valori filled the communication channel. You dare threaten us? With 500 ships? We have destroyed fleets twice your size. Those fleets, Han said softly, were not human. The Valori fleet attacked. 200 warships opened fire with weapons that had shattered a dozen civilizations. Energy beams? Powerful enough to crack. Moons streaked toward the human vessels. The beams hit human shields and vanished. Like rain against stone, silence fell across both fleets. The Valori fired again, pouring everything they had into the assault. Their weapons splashed harmlessly against barriers that should not have existed. Human shields absorbed energy that would have destroyed Confederation battlecruisers 10 times over. Impossible, Fleet Lord Dex whispered. That is impossible. Captain Han gave the order. All ships. Return fire. What happened next would be remembered in Valori nightmares for generations. Human weapons did not fire beams or missiles or any technology the galaxy recognized. They fired something new, concentrated fields that tore through Valori shields like paper, that ripped warships apart at the molecular level. The first Valori ship died in 3 seconds. The second followed immediately. By the time Fleet Lord Dex understood what was happening, half his fleet was gone. Retreat. He screamed, all ships retreat. But human weapons moved faster than Valori engines. Ships trying to flee were caught and destroyed before they could enter jump space. In 11 minutes, the greatest fleet the Valori Empire had ever assembled became scattered debris drifting through the void. Captain Han watched the destruction with no satisfaction. These had been living beings, enemies who had chosen wrong, but who had still been alive. She thought about the children on New Busan, waiting for food that would never come, and hardened her heart. Ground forces, she said, begin landing. General Shinjun-woo led the first wave. His soldiers dropped through the atmosphere in pods that the Valuri ground defenses could not target. They landed in the capital city with surgical precision, securing government buildings while minimizing casualties. The Valori leadership was captured within hours. Representative Keth, who had laughed at humanity in the council chamber, was found hiding in a shelter beneath his mansion. He looked at the human soldiers with eyes that held a new emotion. One his species had never felt toward humans before. Fear. Across the galaxy, the news spread at the speed of light. Humanity had emerged from nowhere with weapons that defied understanding. The Valori Empire, one of the most powerful members of the Confederation, had fallen in a single day. Emergency sessions convened on 100 worlds. Species that had dismissed humans as primitives suddenly reviewed every interaction they had ever had. They searched their records for warning signs they might have missed. They found nothing. Humanity had hidden everything perfectly. On the Confederation Capital Station, Elder Vorix called the council to order with trembling hands. Representatives from 100 species filled the chamber, but the usual confidence was gone. They looked at each other with suspicion, wondering who else might have been hiding their true strength. The doors opened. An Ambassador Park Jinyu walked in. He wore no diplomatic insignia. His clothes were plain the simple uniform of United Earth's command. He moved to the center of the chamber and stood where he had stood 200 times before, asking for crumbs of respect that were never given. "You had centuries," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast room. "Centuries to treat us as equals. We built your stations. We grew your food. We died in your wars. And every day, every single day, you reminded us that we were nothing." He looked at Elder Vorix, who seemed to have shrunk since their last meeting. "The Valori blockade has been lifted. New Busan is receiving supplies. Your ships have been destroyed, your leaders captured, your empire humbled. And we are just getting started. What do you want?" Vorix asked, and his voice cracked with desperation. Jinyu smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of a man who had begged for 300 years and been denied every time. "Now you ask what we want," he said. "Now, when it is too late. Now, when you have no choice," shook his head slowly. "You had your chance to ask that question. You wasted it laughing." He turned and walked toward the doors, leaving the council in stunned silence. "What happens now?" Someone called after him. Jinyu stopped but did not turn around. "Now," he said, "you learn what it feels like to be powerless. And perhaps, if you learn well, there will be something left when the lesson is over." The doors closed behind him. In the chamber, 100 species sat in terrified silence. Finally understanding what they had awakened, the patience of humanity had ended, and the galaxy had only itself to blame. In the 60 days that followed the fall of the Valori Empire, the galaxy learned what human efficiency truly meant. Intelligence Commander O. Juan sat in a darkened room aboard the command carrier Eternal Justice, watching holographic displays that showed the collapse of empires. She had spent 40 years building the network that made this possible, agents hidden in plain sight, systems compromised by code that looked like innocent software, relationships cultivated with patient care. Now all that work paid its dividend in blood and fire. "The Montari fleet has surrendered at Sector 7, an officer reported. "Their command structure has collapsed." O nodded without emotion. The Montari had been humanity's cruelest critics. Their representatives had called humans talking animals in council sessions. Their traders had cheated human merchants for generations, knowing no court would rule against them. Their soldiers had killed human prisoners for sport during the border wars, claiming it was cultural practice. Now their empire was gone in 6 days. Admiral Yunhana stood at the strategic display, watching human fleets move across the galaxy like a spreading wave. 40,000 ships, each one capable of breaking worlds, struck with coordination that the Confederation had never seen. Human commanders did not fight for glory or territory. They fought to win, completely and permanently, Port Yun said. 7 major powers neutralized, Commander O replied. The Valuri, Montari, Corax, Stellari, Nexon, Thune, and Vorath empires have all surrendered or been militarily disabled. Combined fleet losses, 12 ships. 12 ships. Against 7 empires that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, the aliens had never imagined such a thing was possible. They had fought each other for millennia, grinding wars that lasted decades and cost millions of lives. Humanity ended empires in days. The secret was simple. Humans did not fight fair. While the Confederation species announced their attacks with formal declarations and positioned their fleets in traditional formations, humanity struck from everywhere at once. Hidden ships emerged behind enemy lines. Agents sabotaged defense systems from within. Communication networks collapsed under attacks no one saw coming. By the time alien commanders understood what was happening, the war was already lost. Diplomatic envoy Nam Suho moved through the conquered territories with a different mission. Not all species had participated in humanity's oppression. Some had spoken against the blockade of New Busan. Some had quietly helped human traders when no one was watching. Some had simply stayed silent, too weak to help but unwilling to harm. These species received Nam with cautious hope. He came not with weapons but with offers fair trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, seats in a new galactic government where all species would have equal voice. Why? Asked the Fenari ambassador, a small creature with large eyes who had argued for human rights in the council for decades. You could crush us as easily as the others. Why offer peace? Nam smiled gently. Because humanity remembers who its friends were. We remember every kindness and every cruelty. Those who helped us, even in small ways, will find us generous. Those who hurt us will find us thorough. The Fenari joined the new alliance. So did the Alemi, the Teska, and a dozen other minor species who had suffered under Confederation rule. They had lived in fear of the great powers for generations. Now they watched those powers crumble and saw a chance for something better. But not everyone understood. The Tyranni, who had led the Confederation for 10,000 years, refused to surrender. Elder Vorik sent message after message demanding negotiations, offering compromises, threatening consequences that he no longer had the power to deliver. Admiral? Yoon read each message and deleted it without reply. They want to talk, Commander O observed. They finally want to hear what we have to say. They want a delay, Yoon replied. They want time to rebuild, to find allies, to discover weaknesses in our fleet. They do not want peace. They want another chance to put us back in our place. She was right. Intelligence reports showed Tyranni agents trying to unite the defeated empires against humanity. Secret messages promised that the great powers could still win if they stood together. Plans were drawn up for assassination attempts against human leaders. Humanity's response was swift and absolute. The Tyranni homeworld was surrounded by 1,000 human ships. Not 500 like the Valuri attack. Not 5,000 like the Montari campaign. 1,000 enough to darken the sky. Enough to make the message absolutely clear. Elder Vorix attempted to contact Admiral Yoon directly. Please, we can discuss terms. We can find a solution that benefits both our peoples. War is not necessary. Yoon's face appeared on Tyranni's screens across the planet. Her expression held nothing, no anger, no triumph, no satisfaction. Only the exhaustion of someone completing a task that should never have been required. For 300 years, she said, humanity sent ambassadors to ask for a seat at your table. For 300 years, you laughed. You told us to wait another century. You told us we were not mature enough. You told us to know our place. She paused. Your place is now what you made ours. You will accept unconditional surrender. You will disband your military forces. You will release all humans in your territory. You will pay reparations for 3 centuries of exploitation. These terms are unacceptable, Vorix protested. We are the Tyranni. We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. You ruled because others let you rule, because they believed your strength protected them. That belief is gone now. Yoon leaned forward slightly. You have 1 hour to surrender. After that, we will remove your ability to refuse. The hour passed. The Tyranni did not surrender. Human ships did not destroy their world. That had never been the plan. Instead, they disabled every military installation on the planet. Every shipyard, every weapons factory, every defense griddle of it went dark in a single coordinated strike that lasted 90 seconds. The Tyranni Empire, which had dominated the galaxy since before humans discovered fire, became defenseless in less than 2 minutes. Elder. Vorix surrendered the next morning, in her quarters aboard the Eternal Justice. Admiral Yoon allowed herself one moment of private emotion. She thought about her grandfather, who had worked in alien mines until his body broke. She thought about her mother, who had died in the border wars, defending people who called her species primitive. She thought about all the humans across 3 centuries, who had suffered and waited and hoped that someday things would change. They had changed now. She straightened her uniform and returned to the command deck. There was still work to be done. The old galaxy was dying. A new one was being born, and humanity would make certain this one was better. 1 year after the war began, the galaxy gathered on a station that used to be the heart of the Confederation. The great chamber that had witnessed centuries of alien arrogance now hosted something new. The first session of the Galactic Assembly taught Park. Genu stood at the central platform. Wearing the simple gray robes of his new office, he was chairman now, leader of a government that stretched across thousands of worlds and hundreds of species. The title felt strange on his shoulders. He had spent 40 years as a beggar asking for scraps. Now he held more power than any human in history. The chamber was full, but it looked different than before. The floating platforms no longer separated species by power and prestige. All representatives sat at the same level, in a circle that had no head. The Fenari ambassador sat beside the Tirani delegate. The Montari representative shared a platform with Hum. Ants from newbies in the colony, they had tried to starve just 1 year ago. This assembly is called to order, Genu announced, and his voice carried to every corner of the vast room. We meet not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals, beginning a new chapter in galactic history. He paused, looking at the faces around him. Some showed hope. Some showed fear. Some showed resentment poorly hidden behind diplomatic masks. All of them listened. The Confederation is dissolved, Genu continued. Its laws, its councils, its systems of privilege, it ends today. In its place, we establish the Galactic Assembly, where every species has one vote and every voice matters equally. The new constitution appeared on screens throughout the chamber. It was short humans had learned that long documents created room for exploitation. The rules were simple. No blockades of civilian worlds. No restriction of trade based on species. No military action without Assembly approval. No second-class citizens anywhere in Assembly space. These principles are not negotiable, Genu said. They will be enforced. Behind him, Admiral Yoon Hannah stood in full uniform. The fleet she commanded was no longer hidden. Human ships patrolled every major trade route, every strategic system, every former Confederation capital. They were not there to threaten. They were there to remind. The Tirani delegate rose to speak. He was young. Yelder Vorax had died of shame 3 months after the surrender, and a new generation now represented his species. His voice was careful, measured, uncertain. Chairman Park, the Tirani people accept these terms. We understand now that our treatment of humanity was wrong. We ask only for the chance to prove that we can be worthy partners in this new order. Genu nodded. The Assembly welcomes all species willing to embrace equality. The past is not forgotten, but it need not define the future. Other delegates rose with similar statements. Some were sincere, some were not. Genu could tell the difference. 40 years of diplomacy had taught him to read alien faces as easily as human ones. The insincere ones would be watched. Humanity's intelligence network remained active, monitoring those who might try to restore the old ways. After the formal session, Genu walked through the station's corridors with Admiral Yoon at his side. Workers from a dozen species were removing the old Confederation symbols, replacing them with the simple emblem of the Assembly, a circle of stars with no center. No hierarchy, no species above another. They hate us, Yoon observed quietly. Many of them. They smile and speak of cooperation, but in their hearts, they hate what we have done. Some of them, Genu agreed. The ones who enjoyed power. The ones who benefited from the old system. He stopped at a window overlooking the stars. But others, the Fenari, the Alemi, the 100 small species who were crushed under Confederation rule, they see hope. For the first time in their history, they have a voice that matters. Is it enough? Genu considered the question. It has to be. We did not fight this war to become what they were. We fought to build something better. He turned to face her. Your part is almost done, Admiral. The fleet will remain visible, but the fighting is over. Now comes the harder work making this new system survive. You nodded slowly. I have spent my life preparing for war. I am not certain I know how to prepare for peace. None of us do. We learn together. In a different part of the station, historian Moon Hajin conducted interviews with the defeated. Her project was simple: to document everything, to create a record that future generations would study and learn from. She spoke with Turani elders who remembered when their species ruled unchallenged. She spoke with Montari commanders who had ordered attacks on human colonies without a second thought. Why? She asked them over and over. Why did you treat us the way you did? The answers were always the same. They had believed humans were lesser beings. They had believed human patience was weakness. They had believed the galaxy would always belong to the strong, and humanity would never be strong. We were wrong, the old Turani admiral admitted, his voice hollow. We saw what we wanted to see. We heard what confirmed our beliefs. When your ambassador spoke of fairness and equality, we heard a pet begging for treats. We never imagined you were wolves pretending to be dogs. Moon recorded everything. The arrogance, the blindness, the casual cruelty that had seemed so normal to those who practiced it. She would compile these testimonies into a document that every human child would study. A reminder of what their ancestors had endured, why the new order was worth protecting. The final ceremony took place at sunset, or what passed for sunset, on a station orbiting between stars. Chairman Park addressed the assembly one last time. We did not want this war, he said. Every human who lived through the Confederation years knows this truth. We wanted respect. We wanted fairness. We wanted to be treated as equals in a galaxy we helped to build. He looked at the assembled delegates, at the humans and aliens sitting together in the great chamber. You forced us to take what you refused to give. You taught us that words were not enough, that patience was not respected, that only strength would earn what kindness deserved. His voice softened. Let this be the last time any species learns this lesson about humanity. We do not wish to teach it again. We do not wish to build empires or rule over others. We wish only to live in a galaxy where every being matters, where every voice is heard, where no child starves because their people were born on the wrong world. He raised his hand toward the window, toward the stars that stretched beyond counting. That galaxy begins today, not through the force we use to create it, but through the choices we make to preserve it. We have shown you what we are capable of when pushed beyond our limits. Now let us show you what we are capable of when given the chance to build. The chamber fell silent. Then, slowly, applause began, uncertain at first, then growing stronger. Not just from humans. From Fenari and Alami and Teska, from minor species who had never dared to clap in this room before. Even some Turani joined, their clapping awkward but genuine. Admiral Yoon watched from the back of the chamber. She thought about the fleet waiting in the darkness. 40,000 ships that could destroy or protect depending on how they were used. She thought about the responsibility that came with such power, and hoped the generations that followed would be wise enough to use it well. The galaxy had made its mistake. It had confused human patience for weakness, human kindness for submission, human restraint for inability. Now the galaxy knew better, and perhaps, if everyone learned from this moment, no one would ever have to learn that lesson again. Chairman Park stepped down from the platform, and the new era began, not with conquest, but with hope. Not with weapons, but with words finally given the power they deserved. Humanity had waited 300 years for this day. It had been worth the wait.